Welcome to the Business of Cannabis podcast. I'm your guest host today. My name is Michael Zaitsev. I'm the Academic Director of Business of Cannabis degree programs at LIM College, and I'm joined by Bruce Barcott, the Senior Editor of Leafly. Bruce, thanks for joining me today, and I understand there's an exciting new report out of Leafly that you've come to tell us about, so why don't you just tell us about it?
Sure. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be back in New York City. What we've got is a report coming out from Leafly. It's called the Opt-Out Report, and this is a project that's been in the works for a number of months, and we're working with our team of data analysts at Leafly, along with Bo Whitney of Whitney Economics, who's one of the leading economic minds in cannabis. And we were taking a look at the question of whether when a local town or county chooses to opt out of cannabis legalization, that is basically banning all cannabis businesses, what effect that actually has on local towns, local citizens, underage access, all these sorts of things. And we came up with some really interesting data.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but I just want to shout out the work that you do at Leafly, and this is one of many reports. There's the Leafly Jobs Report. There's a whole bunch of awesome educational resources on Leafly that I actually have my students go through in their college classes. And Bruce is also the author of a book called Weed the People, which if you haven't read it, it's a must read if you're new to the space especially. But Bruce, tell us about the findings of this latest report, the opt-out report.
Sure. One of the things that we found kind of sifting through the data we have on sales in various states, how many jobs are created, how much tax money comes in from legal sales, is that essentially when you legalize without allowing consumers to find stores to buy legally, to access weed, they will access it illegally. And we found a number of really interesting sort of subsets of data within that report. I mean, one of the interesting things we found was that consumers generally will travel up to like 13 to 14 minutes from home to purchase legally. And beyond that, if they don't have a store that's convenient, they really will turn elsewhere. And that's where we come into the issue of towns that are opting out. We find that, I think the fallacy is the local leaders believe that they are holding cannabis at bay, like they're keeping cannabis out of their communities. Well, we know that cannabis is already in every community in America. And so what they're doing, essentially, without realizing it, is they're creating economic protection zones for legacy market sellers, for unlicensed sellers. And that creates a host of problems.
Can you tell us more about some of those problems that create?
Yeah, well, the first problem is legacy market sellers don't ask for ID. This is one of the main reasons you hear over and over from local leaders. They want to protect families, they want to protect children, this sort of thing. And what they don't realize is that the mechanisms that are in place, the tight regulations that each state puts into place when that state legalizes, actually keep kids from accessing cannabis because they're both stopped at the door and asked for ID. And in most states, they're actually stopped again at the register to represent the ID. So people are asked to prove that they're 21 or older twice. We have looked at data from various states that actually run checks on cannabis stores. They'll send in an undercover agent who looks young or maybe looks a little older, but maybe not be 21. And in those states, Colorado and Washington especially, we find a compliance rate of nearly 100%. I mean, like 97, 99% compliance. And that is contrasted with alcohol, where the compliance rate usually ranges in the 70 to 80% range. And that's because those cannabis stores, their entire business is on the line. like their license will be suspended or pulled if they're caught selling to someone underage. Yeah.
Right, and I know we see this problem in New York right now with all the unlicensed shops where, I know high school kids, my college students are visiting those shops, and even adults go into these shops thinking that they're legit or licensed, but
right.
They don't know the difference most of the time.
Right, and that's where I think education comes in, and where the need for states to actually issue licenses and get those stores up and running enters the question. I mean, one of the other effects we saw with opt-out towns is that for adults who want to purchase legally and are not able to, questions of product safety and public health come into play. We saw, unfortunately, back in 2019, there was a whole rash of lung injuries from illicit market vape cartridges, and they were essentially tainted with an oil that was really noxious to the lungs, and we ended up with 3,000 people in the hospital and 60 people dead, and that was an illicit market product that would not make it in the legal market because testing is required. You have to make sure that there's nothing bad in your carts. So that's another thing that comes into play when we talk about an opt-out town really protecting that unlicensed market.
Is there any data point that you came across that you're really surprised or that was not expected for you?
I think one of the data points that we're continually both surprised but in a positive way about is the fact that in states that legalize and regulate cannabis, underage use actually does not rise as a result of that. It either remains the same, has no effect, or slightly dips. And the theory on this is that essentially, when you legalize and provide enough stores, you eventually, over time, the illicit market, cannabis consumers who are enjoying it prior to legalization will, over time, migrate into the legal stores and purchase. People generally, one of the people who was behind the Washington State campaign many, many years ago told me, we find that people generally like to follow the law. And so you get both the migration of old legacy market consumers into legal stores, and then you get a certain percentage of adults who are curious but were hesitant to try when it was illegal, and they'll come in and try. These are typically often your edible consumers, this sort of thing.
Right, and those are the folks that really need to be in a place where the products are tested and regulated.
Absolutely.
They don't have that education or experience of,
right.
What's a 5 milligram gummy going to do to me versus a 50 milligram gummy?
Right.
And interesting. So, anything else that we didn't cover that you think our audience needs to know about?
Yeah, I think one of the things we tried to do with this report is really ground this idea that opt-out towns are really protecting the illicit market and causing harm that they don't realize within their own communities. We wanted to really ground that in strong, solid data, and we were able to do that. And so we've got the full report. It's about a 20-page report up on leafly.com. Just search for the opt-out report. And we also wanted to provide some resources for local leaders. These are folks who are, often volunteering. They're local town council members. They meet every Tuesday night at the town council chamber, or maybe even like the basement of the library, and they're faced with a decision on a subject that they really know nothing about. And so we're providing in this report a lot of resources for them to learn about it, to learn how to regulate, to learn how other towns regulate, and look at adopting some of those regulations themselves.
So yeah, I'm glad you said that, because to your earlier point about education, here you have folks who are, I'm going to assume, well-intentioned, but they're just not cannabis experts. They haven't studied the industry. They have to regulate a whole bunch of things, and this is just the new thing for them, and they're trying to do something good, but then you see, like in this case, the policy that they enact where they think they're promoting public safety and public health actually has the opposite effect sometimes. So Any other examples of that
Well,
in
we've got,
cannabis?
yeah, we've got, the states that we were looking at very intensely were New York, which until recently had about a 50% opt-out rate. New Jersey, where 70% of local municipalities were opting out, and California, where 60% were opting out. And California has had their market up and running for a number of years, and the unfortunate effect of that opt-out is that you have essentially too many farmers in California and too few shops. Like, they're producing enough cannabis for 40 million people in California, but there really are not enough stores for that product to move through and reach those legal consumers. And they're really having a problem with that right now. And we're hoping, with the new markets open in New Jersey and New York, that they can take a look at this issue and really get ahead of it and not have that California problem come up on them.
Right. My understanding that in California, just like New York, there's a lot more unlicensed shops than licensed shops right now. So hopefully, with reports like this one and more education, more data, policymakers will be able to make smarter policy and support the legal market so that it can reach its full potential and so consumers can have safe access.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're talking about New York, the New York market a lot today, and the New York market right now, there are 40 dispensaries statewide. There are now just 4 open adult use stores, hopefully 175 coming on board in the next year or so. But, that's an industry that has, about $150 million in annual sales. That supports about 2,000 jobs. In 10 years from now, if everything works well, we're expecting New York to be a $4 billion market supporting up to 60,000 jobs. But that's if it goes well, and that requires a lot of work getting licenses out, a lot of work educating people as to why they should buy legally as opposed to on the legacy market.
Yep. And I know it's tricky because so many people are used to purchasing on the legacy market, and they see these stores pop up, the unlicensed stores, and they think they're legit.
It's really confusing. It is really confusing. And, there's also a sort of nuanced point in here where nobody really who's in cannabis wants to see any more arrests. And so with the gray market stores, they're unlicensed, but a lot of us, like myself, it's like, look, let's not arrest anybody else. We've done enough arresting with cannabis already. Let's find new ways to help move those people into licensed stores, educate people as to why they should buy licensed and tested and clean and great products that have gone through this whole system we've set up. It's good stuff. And it's good stuff, but you'll pay a little bit of a premium for it. You're not getting swag in a bag. So
yeah, it's a controversial issue these days for sure, especially with State Senator Liz Krueger, who put forth MRTA here in New York. Now she's recently saying that the folks operating these unlicensed stores will never get a license, which is, a lot of us are saying, well, that's not going to solve this problem.
I understand. I understand the impetus. I understand where she's coming from. At the same time, it is we're trying to help bring people into the licensed space, not force anybody out or punish people for I mean, look, they've got an entrepreneurial spirit. Good on them. But we're also they're also undermining now a lot of people who were playing by the rules and who have actually paid the price in the past. These are folks impacted by the criminal justice system, and they're good. They're putting out good products. It's worth stopping by those stores.
That's right. They're all from Housing Works to Smacked to Union Square Travel Agency, I think it's called, and now there's the store in Buffalo. Can't remember the name. I think it's Blaze maybe, but. And hopefully more stores coming soon. It'll be very interesting to see if we could get those 100+ new stores open before the end of the year. I think that'll be exciting to see that happen.
Yeah, I think so. And again, that's really key. Allowing consumers who want to buy legally to buy legally and not having to drive for 2 hours to do so, that's really critically important.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely. And again, to have that safe tested product where, especially if someone is immunocompromised or has some kind of medical use case for their cannabis, that they're getting a safe product.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, I think that's all the time we have today. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, and again, remind people where they can find those.
Sure.
reports.
Look for the opt-out report at leafly.com and dive in. It's great reading. And hopefully, if you're a resident of an opt-out town, you can start circulating that information and reach out to your local leaders. You have a voice, and it really does make a difference.
Fantastic. Love that. Thank you. All right. I don't know how do we do on time?
Great.
I wasn't